Simon, you're nodding like crazy. I mean, is risk sharing a real way forward?
Absolutely, and I think just adding absolutely to that point, changing the way that we partner and we talk. I know it sounds relatively simple, but so much still of what we do is transactional and is supplier-buyer type relationships. And I think we'll know it's working when we can devise ways of getting the same side of the table to meet some of the challenges out there. Because I think still there's a lot of inherent inefficiency and barriers to take up because we spend an awful lot of time in this sort of buyer-supplier type relationship. I think we need to find ways of communicating and getting through that.
And Rick, does risk sharing mean you carrying some of the financial can as well?
I think risk sharing can come in a variety of forms, but I would agree absolutely with my colleagues here. First of all, as Jim was saying, this is a very complex issue. It's not something where just throw a switch and it's solved overnight. I really fundamentally believe it comes down to communicating with each other, collaborating, and establishing mechanisms, forums, where we can come together as partners, not to try and sell each other on our products. That comes later. But there is a vast amount of knowledge across our companies sitting on this stage today, and indeed out in this audience. And if we can bring them together, there's a lot of learnings, not just from within the healthcare systems of the world, but in fact from many industries, just like BT, like Cisco, like any of us who say, we've been there, we've tackled those problems, let's see how they can apply to this particular industry.
And is it realistic to expect every company to share its experience in that way? Because sharing your experience is a wonderful thing to do, but does it affect your competitive position at some point in the future? I mean,
yeah, so let's start with the first question. Is it realistically expect that every company would? No. Many companies don't have the inclination to share. They don't necessarily see the benefit to them as a company. After all, they're out to make profit. But the large corporations generally do have the interest and the need to share. Healthcare costs us as a company a great deal of money. When our employees are sick, we lose productivity. We have to pay health insurance. The healthier we can make our employees and our societies, the better it is for us as companies anyway. And so we have an inclination in that sense. We have an inclination because we have a duty to society. And I think there are definitely ways in which we can share information, knowledge, thought, without compromising our commercial interests.
Okay, Richard, do you want to pick up on that?
I would like to pick up on Clay's point actually about pilots and how we scale them. You know, I would love to ban the word pilot from the NHS. I'd like to start talking about, phase one deployments. Let's do a phase one deployment. Let's agree the business case up front. Let's agree the key performance indicators up front. Yes, let's bring in some risk share. Let's have some payment up front so that there's some skin in the game, as the Americans say, horrible phrase we hate to use, some commitment up front. And then when the business plan has been delivered, when the KPIs have been delivered, all be they around improved efficiency, reduced bed days, whatever it might be, then another payment is made. So I'm a firm believer in true risk share, where we're both in it together as a partnership. And as I say, I think we should move away from running pilots and then celebrating how successful a pilot has been at the end and then saying, now what do we do? Let's agree up front how a whole deployment is going to look scaled, and let's do a phase one of it, prove it, and scale it from there.
Jim, are you enthused by what you've heard? Anything you'd like to cherry pick from the ideas?
I agree with it. I would caution one or two things, but it's in the spirit of strongly agreeing. I mean, firstly, on the point of clinicians buying into change and efficiency. I mean, working with clinicians is the reason I love doing this job. But there is a difference between mythical efficiency and real efficiency. So when you put that device in and it saves 2 bed days, the efficiency is generated when you close the beds and you take the staff out. And sometimes the people who are enthusiastic about the bit that involve buying the kit aren't standing next to you with the TV cameras on you on the closing the wards. And we need, let's join up in an adult way and not just market the front-end benefits, but share an advocacy for it being the right thing for England to have fewer hospital beds and no unnecessary staffing them. I sometimes feel full of company on the first part and slightly more alone on the second. And risk sharing, I think, is great, but again, it's often confounded by the technical complexities of what drove those bed day reductions. And I think people are just nervous about the metrics of getting in. But I agree with it's important. I do think that when I listen, we do have a bit of a habit of regarding the NHS as an industry, of an organisation in which you could do a phase 1 deployment and phase 2. The NHS never has been a homogenous organisation, and it's less like one in the future, which is why what I was trying to say when I spoke earlier, my obsession is about what are the points of scale that we need to create that you can apply those to. Unless you've got something that people themselves recognise as a thing that you can apply that deployment to, then it's pointless trying to create it. From the point of view of dissemination, we're a bit like quantum mechanics. Are you a particle or a wave? Are you an organisation or an industry? It depends what the issue is and what the question is. But on the issue of deployment of innovation, we behave more like an industry than an organisation.
Right, and we heard from Jim just a few moments ago about some of the restraints on the adoption of innovation within the NHS. So let me ask each of our panelists, starting with you, Rick, how would you accelerate, given what you've heard from Jim, how would you accelerate the process of adopting innovation within the NHS? What are the one or two key things that you think could be done, given the restraints that we just heard about?
Well, and I think one of the key things is to differentiate between invention and adoption or scaling. Much of the innovation it's more about execution than it is about idea creation or invention. That's not to say that invention's a bad thing. There's some amazing things going on in this exhibition here today. But fundamentally, invention doesn't get you very far unless you can scale it across your organization, your company, your industry. And so it really is determining first and foremost, what are the things that we can actually scale and what are foundational to this innovation? What are the foundational components? Let me give you an example of what I mean. If you look at the music industry and we take the much vaunted Apple computers, it isn't the iPod that was fundamentally the great innovation. It was iTunes. It was the foundational platform upon which they've now built many variants of the iPod and now the iPad and everything else in between. So it was iTunes that was foundational, that allowed a whole raft of things to be built on top of it and scaled across their particular industry. So that would be one of the first things I would look for. And then secondly, how to connect people so that they can actually collaborate, share the knowledge, and then drive the innovation through the company.
Does it mean that in general there are quite a few small projects in microcosm that might have to bite the bullet because they won't be accepted for scaling up? And is it potluck on that?
It should not be potluck. Yeah. It sometimes is. There is no company in the world, no industry in the world that I'm aware of that has enough money and enough people to do everything. You have to select, you have to prioritize. That does not mean that the biggest, brightest, shiniest objects should always be the ones that get selected. But there does need to be a selection mechanism, a prioritization mechanism, and the goal of selection should always be that scaling objective. This is not a science experiment, it's not a demo or a pilot just for the sake of it. The intent has to be to scale.